So the next portion of the afternoon is going to be covering, okay, you've been convinced you want to run for public office. So what are the nuts and bolts? What's the actual process for going through that? And we had planned on having Ryan Craig with Montour County's elections office to help walk us through that process. But unfortunately, Ryan couldn't be with us this afternoon. So two of our panelists with the experience that they have offered to stay and help provide some of that information as well. And especially valuable having Commissioner Holdren with us because the county commissioners do have a role in the actual election voting process. So maybe you want to start with that.
So as one of my other roles as a county commissioner is I actually chair the Board of Elections for Montour County as well. So the three commissioners are the Board of Elections for Montour County. So we have oversight of the elections in addition to our commissioner responsibilities. And, you know, again, what you'll find is small counties, that's pretty typical. In larger counties, there is a separate Board of Elections that's independent of the Board of Commissioners. So the commissioners aren't involved in spending 18 hours on election day, being sure that they're available to respond to any and all election inquiries and to deal with the issues that come up. So in terms of the election process and requirements, the first step is called the petitioning process. And for each office to get your name on the ballot for the election, you have to complete a petition. And the petition are available now. They became available. You can pick up petitions beginning February 14th. And you have until March 7th to get that petition back into the election office. Now, there's some additional steps that need to be done, and I'll try to remember all of them for you. But the key thing is how many signatures do you need? When it's a local election, like a council member, a school board, a township supervisor, a tax collector, you need 10 signatures on your petition. If it's a county-wide position, so for example, in Montour County, this general election, the commissioners up for re-election, the register and recorder, the prothonotary, the coroner, and because our district justice resigned April 1st, we also have a district justice up for re-election. For those county-wide positions, you need 100 signatures. Okay. Now, for the positions that I just mentioned, you can only do a petition for the party that you are a member of. So I think we described earlier that there are some residency requirements. For most of them, is to be a resident of the county that you're running for office for a minimum of 1 year. Some have longer tenures when you start to look at state and national level offices. Let me see. I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm sorry.
So they have to be registered
so
and resident.
They have to be registered and residents and only members of that party. So one of the things that's unique about Montour County is you would think Riverside is part of Montour. It's not. Okay. So Riverside is part, when it's the Danville School District, they're part of the Danville School District. But when I first started circulating my petition, I was getting signatures from Riverside, and I think count because they're not a resident of Montour County. I'm sorry, go ahead, question.
What about people who are registered for the third party? Is it only Democrat or Republican?
It's only Democrat, Republican in the Pennsylvania primary elections.
There is a mechanism, Jason, for a third party to get on the ballot. It's a little more cumbersome than what we do. I don't know it because I'm not a third party, but I know there's a way. Not for the primary though. It'd be for the general election.
It's a separate process, and I believe the timing for that is by August.
Okay.
I believe the timing it's a separate to get on your name on the ballot as an independent or another party. It's a different process, and I'm not,
It's more cumbersome is what I can tell you. Pennsylvania election laws are set up obviously to benefit the two parties. Where you have to, some states, and I think New Hampshire, where they have the first presidential, you can go in on election day for the primary and say, I'm going to vote for the Democrat ticket today, even though I'm a registered Republican or independent. You can't do that. If you're a member of the Republican Party or Democratic Party, that is the ballot that you can cast in the spring primary. And it's antiquated, I think, but it is what it is, and we got to deal with it.
the other thing I would point out is if it's a school board race, there's also something that's called cross-filing that you're allowed to do. Okay, which means that you can run on both parties. For every other, the offices I mentioned, you can only run for the party you're a member of. For school board, you can do a process called cross-filing. But the caveat for that is, if I'm a Republican and I'm running for school board and I want to cross-file as a Republican and Democrat, I have to get a registered Montour County Democrat to circulate my petition to get me on the Democratic ballot. So that's kind of the nuance for school board, that there is an option to cross-file. And I would encourage, if you're running for school board, you should cross-file so that you're on both Democrat and the Republican ballots. But the trick is that for whatever party you are, you need somebody from the other party to circulate your petition for you. When you're circulating petitions, you can have other people circulate for you, but at the end of the process, there's a verification process that you've got to do, that you've got to get your petition signed and notarized, and that's all explains it. So what happens is, say I decide I want to run for office, I come into the Montour County Board of Elections office, which happens to be the commissioner's office as well, and the people there would go through a packet, and they would basically give you the information that you need to run as a candidate. One is the petition. Second one is what's called a walking list. And that walking list identifies the registered voters for your party. So if, say, for example, if I was running for county commissioner, I would get a stack this high. Rebecca, I think, has already got this, that has every precinct in Montour County, every registered Republican voters, that I could go through that list and say, okay, here are the potential people that I could go to ask to sign my petition to run for office. Okay, but you'll want a walking list for the area that you're representing. You want the petition. The next thing is there's a state certification process that you got to fill out as running as a candidate, and they'll explain that to you. And then you're going to get into the campaign financing. If you expect to spend less than $250, you don't have to worry about anything when you start out. The minute you cross over that $250 expenditures for your campaign, you're required to file monthly campaign finance reports. And again, the people in the election office will explain this to you as you proceed. And Rebecca, you just went through the process. You may be able to explain it better than I can, because it's been a while since I've done it. But, okay, so when you first walk in, you're going to get overwhelmed with, here are all the things thrown at you that you've got to do to run for office. Okay, but the people are there and they'll help you every step of the way.
So I just want to jump on to the last thing Ken talked about. The $250 limit is per reporting period, and they will give you a calendar of the reporting period. So you are allowed to spend more than $250 without getting into these other reports, but you just have to be careful that you don't spend it beyond that in a specific reporting period. And they will give you a calendar, so it's easy to do, because I've never filed any of those reports, and I spent more than $250. I'm pretty sure. So,
Thanks for the
yeah,
clarification.
that was when I just thought of that today. Oh, and there's one other thing. They're gonna give you as part of your packet, what's called a statement of financial interest. You need to file that at the courthouse when you file your petition, but you also need to take it to, in my case, I need to take it to Berwick City Hall before that deadline, March 7th, and have it handed to them. A friend of mine many years ago got booted off the ballot for school board because she neglected to file that at the school administration building. And quite frankly, the sitting school directors didn't want her to be part of the board, so they were checking stuff like that, and sure enough, they caught her. And she was removed from the ballot because of it. So
explain what that document is.
that document is simply where does your money come from? They don't care how much you earn. You don't have to put your income on there. They just want to know, your employer, if you have investments, rental properties, things like that. You need to list not how much, but just what you have. There's things on there. I list on mine one time. I do it as a sitting official, and Ken does as well. But I got tickets to an Eagles game a few years ago. When I was filling out my form that following year, I listed them as a gift. There's a box for gifts. I don't know how much they cost. I estimated, but they were on there. And that is public information too. So it's subject to right to know, which I've dealt with that a couple of times through my work. A resident right to know in those forms. And I mean, chances are the state is never going to check. But if they ever do and they're not there, you have a problem, you have an ethics. So,
And then going back to your petitions, you always want to get more than the minimum number of petitions. Okay, so if you need 10, you probably want to get 20. If you need 100, you probably want to get 150 to 200. Why? In case there's that challenge that somebody may think they're a registered Republican and they're a registered Democrat. Okay, I will tell you that even though we have these lists and we think they're as current as they can be, there's often mistakes. Okay, things haven't gotten updated, and the electronic systems the way they should have and may not have the most recent registered information. Like I can tell you, a friend of mine that has signed my petition in the past as Republican changed his party affiliation to Independent. So if I didn't know that, and I got it decided that he's still a Republican, and somebody challenged that name on my petition, that name would be ruled that's ineligible. Take that away. So that's why you always want to have more than the minimum number required. Questions?
So two, actually. One is, can you and I sign more than one petition for, like, there's two Republicans running for county commissioner in Montour County. And I, as a Republican voter, sign for both of them on their petition, or no?
So you can sign. So right now, there's 4 Republicans running for Montour County Commissioner. You can sign 2 petitions because you get to vote for 2 in the general election. You can't sign all 4. If you sign all 4 of those, and somebody challenges and goes through and sees your name on all 4 petitions, that vote that is eliminated from all 4. So you're allowed to vote for the number, you're allowed to sign the number of petitions as equal to the number of votes in that election. So classic example, school board. If there's 5 positions on the school board, you can sign 5 petitions for school board candidates. Okay, it's the number of positions on the ballot determines how many petitions can you sign.
So that is an important point that I hadn't thought of, Ken. When you're at the local level, Jay, voting for council, how many people are you allowed to vote?
this year, 3.
So it's
So you
the
can
number
sign.
of, it's
There's
the number of
3
open seats.
There's 3 open seats this year. 2 years from now, there'll be 4. So you can sign 4 petitions then. And it's funny that came up. I specifically didn't go someplace for dinner last night because they were having a petition signing for a candidate, and I already promised another candidate in that race that I would sign their petition. So when my wife said about going to dinner, I said, we can't go there. So you have to be mindful. And most people don't know that. Ken and I know because this is our business. So that's one thing I ask people when I ask them to sign my petition. I said, did you sign for anybody else? And
Do a second question, Chip.
So my second question was, what do you do, this came up yesterday, there's a candidate for school board right now who is circulating both of their petitions. They can only have one party. Told them they can't do that, and they're like,
depends on how far you want to push it.
oh man. So I just wonder, like, you said there is a thing that needs notarized later, so I guess there's some sort of check in place that they're at least gonna have to attest that they did not do that, but
There's gonna be a certification that the person of the other party did the circulation. Not that
And
person.
they have to get that notarized. Like, if I circulate a petition for a Democrat, I have to get that, I have to sign that as a circulator, and I have to get it notarized.
And I certify that I got all the signatures above my name. So that's,
I guess this person just thinks they'll get all the top signatures filled out and get somebody to.
And maybe they will, but
Yeah, not,
but you're no different, and
know.
it depends on what you want to do.
that's an out question.
that's,
Go ahead, Chris.
I was just gonna supplement what Ken had said about how you're signing petitions in like common mistakes. There was a candidate who came to a community event that we were doing at our church in Millville, and so they were really excited to see a whole bunch of people in Millville, but more than 50% of the people signing the petition signed themselves as residents of Millville, when in fact they were residents of Pine Township. And so those would have failed the verification.
We have that with Berwick and Salem Township. People think they live in Berwick, and you say, what's your address? And nah, you live in Salem Township. You know, people don't always realize.
Vanessa, did you have a question?
Most of the time, what I've seen in the ballots is that you only run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're running for a specific party. If you switch parties so that you can drive your election to be winner, let's say you know by the statistics that your county is 80% Republican, right? And I am Democrat, but I want to run for office, and I switch then to Republican, and then run for office. Yes, Republican.
but there's deadlines in terms of the number of days you gotta do it prior to the election, prior to, it's like the example is, if you're, if you're picking up a petition on February 14th, switch your party affiliation before February 14th.
If you're thinking about running,
Right.
who you're.
Right.
I've-
See which one.
I've known voters switch party to try to keep someone off the ballot. Like if there's somebody, if they're a Republican and there's somebody who's running as a Democrat who they absolutely worst case scenario would never want to see, I've seen people switch parties to vote against that person in the primary.
And for the, in terms of voting in the primary, you can do that up until the day of the election. Switch party.
And then switch back for the general.
Yes. So if you can just go back and forth in the parties, what weight does the affiliation have? You know what I mean?
In Columbia County, the affiliation means a great deal because the county is skewed Republican pretty heavily. I don't know, Montour, you probably are too, right?
Yeah, we are.
In this part of the state, it's an advantage to run as a Republican. Locally, it shouldn't matter, like on a local school board or a school board for sure, because you can cross-file, nobody knows what your party is. But on even a borough council, nobody cares.
I think in Columbia County, the town of Bloomsburg is the only Democratic voting. There's more registered Democrats than Republicans in the town of Bloomsburg. Every other municipality in Columbia County, I believe, is
I
Republican.
think Berwick at one point had more Democrats, but that changed with Donald Trump, quite frankly. A lot of people changed parties because of him. I'm not sure.
No. Why still go with that?
Yeah.
Way?
Nobody.
It's the law, right? It's the case of the economy to apply, the law to apply.
Because it's Pennsylvania. I mean, that's just how it is. And I can't, I've run three times, 4 times. Nobody ever asked me what party I was. Nobody, like, people don't care. They locally. Now, county commissioner, they probably care. State house, they definitely care. State senate, Congress, yeah.
Plus, it means something to a lot of people. But I just don't think.
Yeah, I don't either.
Other questions on the process? Ken, was there anything that we missed?
I don't think so. It's a big hitter. I'm hoping
You guys are doing great. So the last piece that I wanted to follow up with, and which is another advantage that you're here, is you mentioned that the commissioners are the Board of Elections. Speak to election integrity. That's an issue that's, there's been a lot of discussion of, and I know your counterparts in Columbia County are very vociferous about election integrity, Commissioner.
So I will tell you that the election integrity in Montour County, I can assure you, is 100% accurate. Okay. One thing that we did in Montour County that puts us at odds with the rest of the state is we do not count our mail-in ballots the day of the election. Okay. Most of the other counties do, and what they're relying on is they're relying that when somebody comes in for an election, there's a poll. So when you go to your precinct to vote, if you got a mail-in ballot, there's an indication on the poll book that this person received a mail-in ballot, so they're not allowed to vote day of election because they received a mail-in. The person may say, but I lost it, I didn't send it in, blah, 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 and demand to vote. So what the process is called is a provisional ballot, where the election worker will give them a ballot, and there's a separate envelope that they will consider it to be a provisional ballot that says, this person is saying that they didn't vote their mail-in ballot and give it to you. What we do is the day after the election, we open all the mail-ins. Okay, we check and we make sure that they didn't vote in the election, so we have that cross check, and then we process those votes. The next day, we take all those provisional ballots and we do the same process. We see that we didn't get a mail-in ballot and they didn't vote at the polls, so therefore that provisional ballot is a count. So those are the steps that we go through person by person. Now, one of the things that you're going to find that we have a problem with is the state changes the rules on us all the time, and they're not consistent. Okay. When you do a mail-in ballot, you're required to sign the secrecy envelope and date it. Okay. When we say the rules are you must sign, you must date. If someone doesn't sign or doesn't date, we don't count that ballot. Okay. The state is pushing that every ballot should count. And so they changed the rules. And so when we had the presidential election with Donald Trump, we had all these different categories of votes waiting for the final court decision of which ones counted, which ones didn't count. So that's the degree that you go through in terms of the accuracy to make sure that the vote, the integrity of the vote is there. All the things about the election machines being tied to the internet, they're not. Basically, all they are is a scanner that tabulates. It's a tabulator. There's no connection to the internet at all on this election machine. And then the other thing that we do as part of our election process is we take a race and we manually hand count a race to verify that the hand count is the same as the machine tabulating count. Those are all the steps that we take to ensure the voter integrity of an election. So I will tell you with 100% confidence that the election results in Montour County are accurate and reflective of the people's will. And that happens in every county. Go ahead.
What happens in the case, let's just say that somebody forgot to send it, that they don't have, and they did that, and then they do show up to vote.
Okay.
Do they still get one of their two votes? Is one of them still counted?
So they get the provisional ballot, they fill out the provisional ballot. Okay? The Board of Elections, 2 days later, says, did we get the mail-in ballot? The answer is no. The provisional ballot counts. The provisional ballot is processed. We look, we get the provisional ballot, we look, we said, did we get the mail-in ballot? Yes. No, the provisional ballot doesn't count. So either way, they got one vote.
But it's
okay.
always the mail-in ballot.
The mail-in ballot trumps the provisional. If we got to, so if somebody says, I changed my mind and who I wanted to vote for, too bad, it's too late. Your mail-in ballot counts, not the provisional. Okay? So.
I'm a poller.
God bless you.
Poller for school, you
Yeah.
have to be trained in
Yeah.
all these procedures. I'll tell you, there is a lot of procedures to lock to make sure only one vote counts. You gotta mail it out, you need to surrender. That surrendering then allows you to use the computer. You don't have a mail-in ballot, there you go. So then it's another problem.
So, that's another good example that I did cite, that if you show up in the poll and you hand over the mail-in ballot, say, here it is, I didn't vote, then you get the ballot.
Yes, to go to the vote. So there's a lot of lots that happen, and there's a lot of work behind a session. It is very right. You know, we start at 6 a.m. and you know the ballots close at 8 the latest. We are done at 10:30 for lunch. Primaries are easy, but you know the real presidential or state could be different. You have to have 3 people counting. There's no internet. There's nothing crazy. It's a computer prints a slip. The other one is a scan. That's what it is. The rest of it all.
So as a good pointer, Nesto, I was going to follow up with the commissioner. So the special election that was just held, then Representative Culver talked about really reminding folks about the special election because it's not on everybody's cycle. What was if you sorry to put you on the spot, but do you know the voter turnout for the recent special election versus say the last presidential election?
So the voter turnout for the special election was in the mid to upper 20s, and the last general election was probably in the 40% range for Montour County.
That's good.
Yeah.
Columbia County the same. We got 18% for primaries for like this special election. There. And what they would know that primary elections are more important than the actual election. So that's what you're choosing. You gotta run for the final office, right? This is a Republican driven county. So you got 2 Republicans running against each other, and you don't care, right? Well, guess what's going to happen in the real election? The one that you didn't choose is the one who won, because it's already they got it back, right? So it's very sad to see the participation so low in primaries, but on the presidential one, it was very similar.
Yeah, and that's the other example. It's like we're going to go through a cycle now of the local elections, and the local elections will have a much lower turnout than the state and national elections, and the local elections what has the most impact on you as a citizen in terms of being able to pick who represents you and has the most impact for you at your local level.
When I voted in 2020, I stood in line for probably an hour to vote, and I knew most of the people in line, and I'm yelling. I said, you dummies don't stand in line to vote for me, and I have more control over your life than Donald Trump or Joe Biden ever. You know, and it always surprises me so much that the people that like we're friends with them, we know them, they know us. They can't be bothered to come out and vote, but then they'll stand in line and vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden.
The ones that have the most impact on your life are the ones that get the 16% vote.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very boring.
Yeah.
When you're serving as a full officer, you're like,
It's a long day.
so what? Like,
Well,
what's
and-
for the presidential one? Oh,
You're busy all day, sure. And
you don't even eat lunch.
there's a real fear. What's going to happen, you know, 5 or 10 years from now? Because most of the poll workers are older people. Yeah, and you know, at some point they're not going to be able to do it anymore. Who's going to replace them for? What do you get paid? $50, $60 a day, or some ridiculous amount?
Yeah.
It's very little. You don't do it for the money, but it's not a great incentive for somebody new to say, yeah, I'll go spend 15 hours at the polling place. So I just wonder what they're going to end up doing.
They don't give you lunch, they don't give you,
Yeah.
food, you gotta bring your appointment.
Yeah.
All you get is a, you know, a token of appreciation check.
So those crock pots sitting in the back aren't provided by the county.
Right, it's not,
Okay, maybe your election slogan next time might be vote for Jay, there's no line.
There's no line.
Well, these gentlemen have done a great job pinch hitting, so thank you for that, but they've also been very generous with their time, so we're gonna let them go and we'll wrap up the last portion of our program this afternoon, so thank you.
Thank you.